Identifying your skills. Okay, the biggest part of this process is just identifying what you can bring to the table. I'm going to be very honest with you when I work with customers, and I bet Sheila, when she works with our customers too, many people will bring to us a skills assessment, or we'll do a skills assessment with them to ascertain what skills they have. And universally, you are underestimating the kind of skills that you have to bring to the table. I promise you that there's a whole host of skills that you have in your back pocket you've probably never thought about, and that you've probably never even thought about bringing to bear in a job application setting or in any type of job interview setting. So we're going to talk a little bit about first how to identify your skills. So, quick quiz. All right, in your head, don't worry, there's no grades. You can't pass it, you can't fail it, don't worry. Think about to yourself how many skills you have that are relevant to employment. So being able to know all the lyrics to New York, New York, that's great. Put that to the side unless you're actually looking to become a lounge singer in Atlantic City. If that's your goal, then that is relevant. But otherwise, put that to the side. Think of the types of careers that you career skills that you have that you can bring to the table, just off the top of your head. Okay, pencils down. So, yep, like a number, just like any number. Do you have 10? Do you have 20? Do you have, how many do you think you have? Okay. So, first off, what's a skill? Okay, it's a skill is any type of ability or talent that you can bring to the table that's relevant to a job. Again, knowing all the lyrics to New York, New York, that's not going to work unless it's a very specific job to do that. Otherwise, there are things that are relevant to the employment. So it's anything you can do, right? That's relevant to the job. How many skills does the average person have? That's why I asked you for this. And the reason why is I promise you, every single one of you underestimated the skills you have. Yep. The average person has between 500 and 800 different skills in their toolbox, in your toolbox, that you can bring to bear. I promise you, you haven't even begun to dig into it. When I work with our customers on writing resumes, one of the biggest things that I see is people sort of summarize kind of what they did, but not the skills they can bring to bear. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is bringing those skills to bear in this job application process. So you have a lot more in your toolbox than you're giving yourself credit for. Right. How many skills can the average person identify? About 10. I'm willing to bet that that's probably a number that you came up with, something similar, 10, maybe 15. So things like that. And the type of skills that you have, there's 3 different types, and we're going to talk about those different types later on, but we're going to talk about them, but they all bring to bear when we talk about the job market and your place in it. So just rest assured that we'll talk about that. But yeah, around 10 is where we usually get. We tap out around 10-ish. What percent of people can't identify, sell, or prove their skills during an interview? 80%. I know it's humbling, isn't it? I'll tell you what, before I started working at Career Force, I started thinking about this every day, all day. I was in that 80%. I promise you, it's not something that comes naturally to people or comes like just to us in a dream. We often undersell ourselves and underestimate our capabilities, yours truly included. So don't feel bad if you're in that percentage of 80%. We're going to help you out and get you into that 20% if we can. So how are skills developed? Okay, a lot of times we only think about 2 ways: the work we did or our education or our educational attainment. Those are 2 of the big ones. Why? Because whenever we're taught to write a resume, what are the things that we're usually asked about? Your experience, your education. Those are the 2 big sections on resumes. So our minds naturally kind of ingrain that. But there's other ways. Volunteer work we did, and that doesn't necessarily need to be with a formal organization like the Red Cross or the Salvation Army. It can be volunteer work you did in the neighborhood. It can be things you did to help a neighbor. socializing and developing communication skills, developing de-escalation techniques, those types of things, just interacting with others. Hobbies, sports, all of the above. Everything that you do develops yourself to some capacity, right? So think broadly about how you've been able to develop your skills and the types of things you've done, not just those top two, because I promise you, you've sharpened and developed skills that you have or didn't have already through this process. Now, what types of skills are most important to employers? Well, should surprise you. Soft skills and people skills, all right? Most of the time, we're going to interact with people, whether that is with other customers, whether that's with colleagues, whether that's with clients. In some way, you're going to be interacting with people and making sure that you have the kind of soft skills to be able to do that work and do it well and do it seamlessly. Those are critical. People really look for those. How will you fit into the team that's already in existence? A lot of times it's not just the skills you bring to the table, but also how you fit into the team and will your skills complement what's in the team already? And how adaptable are you? And when I say adaptable, I'm talking about how quick will you be on the uptake when you get in there? Will you be able to learn the ways and rhythms of this team, this workplace, this office setting, what have you? Those are three of the most critical pieces that when employers are looking to fill their staff map and make you that person that fills in that gap there, those are the three sort of criteria that often they will use in thinking about whether you're going to be the successful candidate. So be aware of that. Now, how does identifying your skills help your job search? Well, a couple of reasons. Let me show you. First, it proves your abilities to your potential employers because when you're talking to a prospective employer or you're applying or you're interviewing or they're on the phone with you doing a screening interview to see if they want to bring you in, knowing the tools you have in your toolbox is going to be something very critical because you don't know who else is in that applicant pool. Particularly if it's a highly competitive type of position, you want to be able to articulate your skills concisely and convincingly because you may not have a lot of time to convince that prospective employer that you're the type of person to bring into the interview or that you're the type of person that they want to bring into their team. So that's something to be aware of because identifying those skills, again, helps you make your case that you're the right person. It helps you write a resume and complete applications in a more holistic way that gives them more of a broad picture of the skills you have. When I say write your resume, if there's one error that I see on my customers' resumes here in Thief River Falls is that it often is a very brief synopsis of things I did. It doesn't actually incorporate the skills I have. I'm willing to bet some of you listening to the sound of my voice right now are thinking, oh gosh, is that my resume? Don't worry, it was my resume too for many, many years. So don't put that on yourself. Don't worry. But as you write your resume, articulating your skills is a more compelling answer to that question that are you going to be a good fit? Are you adaptable? That those prospective employers are thinking about. And it helps you complete applications in a way that is more robust. Sells your qualifications in an interview. Now, we have a different module on interviews. And trust me when I tell you the topic of interviews, we could be here for 2 hours. So don't, we're not going to get into that nitty gritty. But when you think about your skills, a lot of times in the interview process, remember those prospective employers are not just thinking about your qualification set and the core competencies. They're also thinking, are you going to be a good fit with those core competencies? Because everyone in the interview has met at least the minimum thresholds, right? So now in that interview, your job in that interview is to convince that hiring manager, that search committee, what have you, that you're the best person for this job and they need to make that offer to you. All right, so there are three typical types of skills that we talk about when I talk about, again, making the case to the employer that you're the right person when we articulate what we have. Soft skills, okay? Those are things that we use each and every day. You might think, well, of course, everybody has these. You'd be wrong. Those are things like communication, clear communication, being able to resolve interpersonal differences and conflict. Conflict is inherent in every kind of relationship we have with someone. There's never a healthy relationship that has no conflict. So being able to resolve those, that's all those types of soft skills that we bring to bear. Not everybody has them or has mastered them, and that's a big part of this. Job skills, those are skills to a specific job or industry. So let's say you were a graphic artist and you did not know how to use Adobe Illustrator. Okay, I'll just use one from the creative profession as an example. Lacking that skill is a core competency that we may have to have you develop so that you can compete on the job market as a graphic artist or a graphic designer. So that's specific to that industry. If you were looking to change industries and go into marketing or accounting or something like that, that wouldn't necessarily be of importance. But if you're in that specific industry, it's going to be very, very important. Just like if you were in accounting and you didn't know QuickBooks, well, that's a skill you need to have to be able to compete. So those are job specific skills. And then there's transferable skills, and those are used in all kinds of different jobs. So when I talk about transferable skills, I'm talking about like attention to detail, okay? Follow through, organization, or having an organizational structure that works. Those types of skills are things that we use in every single job we have, whether we're communicating with someone, whether we're working on a project by ourselves or within a team. Those are those types of skills that we're talking about in terms of transferable skills. We need to have all three. You see the diagram there. We need to be right in that middle area because that's what the employers are looking for. The people in that middle area are the most desirable kind of candidates to bring on board. I love this. I love this quote. Many people have the confidence of their convictions. My people have the confidence of their convictions, and they know their skills. Excuse me. That's Bill Gates. You all know who Bill Gates is. And one of the things that is critical about that is they know themselves, they know who they are, and they know what their skill sets are. It's a key part of having confidence in yourself and having confidence that you can do your job. When you don't know your skills or you don't know where they are, then it's going to be harder to have that kind of confidence going into any type of job setting, much less a job interview setting. And of course, this whole thing is about getting job interviews and then job offers. So that's part of this process. All right. We're going to just take a deep breath because in the last 20 minutes, you've heard a lot of content. So just want to kind of create a synopsis so everybody can just take a breath. All right. Know the three types of skills again, right? So those soft skills, those job specific skills, and those transferable skills. Think of those things that you have. My guess is you've got quite a few of them and you can bring those to bear. Understand why the importance of identifying your skills is, again, because it makes the case to the prospective employer that you're the right one in a concise and compelling way. When you're talking to a prospective employer, you're not going to, it's not going to have an unlimited amount of time. They're screening potentially for who they're going to bring in for physical interviews, something along those lines. So being able to know what your skills are right off the bat and being able to articulate them concisely, in a compelling way, that's a critically important piece of being able to be the next person on their team. And know how to identify your skills. Again, when you think of your resumes and you think of what you've accomplished in the past, it isn't just your work history and your educational attainment or your educational background. There's a lot of different things that you've done in your life where you have mastered or sharpened or acquired new skills, and you want to be able to know how to bring those to bear. So think of that very broadly as we start to drill down into those three areas, because that's what we want to be able to do. Okay, applications now.
Jason, do you want to take a couple questions?
Yeah, let's do that now. Yes.
Okay, we just have a couple related to what you were talking about.
Sure.
When you put up there that we have 500 to 800 skills, that made some eyes pop, I think. And someone is saying that these must be very specific skills. Does that include competencies with specific software platforms. So do you break them
Absolutely.
down into those little
Yes.
bits of skills?
So when I talk about skills, like, so remember, if you think of that example I gave, like, so an accountant who knows QuickBooks, right? That's a very specific skill that that accountant has. Not just being able to balance a checkbook, we all need to be able to do that, but being able to use like things like QuickBook, or the graphic artist who knows Adobe Illustrator. That's a very specific skill that a graphic artist needs to have. Is that the tenor of the question, or am I off a bit?
I think so. It's probably all those different skill sets you can bring to that. She said yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So it's not just sort of the job specific skills for the field that you're in or the field that you hope to enter. It's also all of the other pieces that you're bringing to bear with you that make you who you are, right? So, and we all have different personalities. So some people are going to have a much better time articulating how attention to detail plays a role in their world, right? I'm taking the example of the accountant. Attention to detail is going to go hand in glove with their work. They're going to have to do that. Musicians, yeah, it's important, but not in the way that it is for that accountant. So think of it like that. And again, think of all the things you've done in the past. Now, obviously, you're not going to have a resume that talks about 800 skills, because no reader is going to get through 800 different skills. We're talking about the skills that we have that we can bring to bear in these job applications. Again, because we're trying to create, the case for you that you are, in a concise, compelling way, the most attractive person they want to bring in to talk to, and then when you're in the interview, that they want to hire. I could go on more, but again, we have other creative job search modules, and we'll touch on that. And I really hope you are able to join us for those, because it's really fascinating. I feel like this is sort of like a cliffhanger, like hopefully you'll come in and do the other ones. It kind of is. But like I said, we could be here all day long talking just on this topic if we wanted to. But
Okay.
that's
There's one more question related to the skills. You
yeah.
you had mentioned something about convictions. So this person says, do employers really want convictions, or are they looking for conformity?
So when I talk about kind of the convictions you have, I'm talking about sort of the principles that guide your work, right? Like being a team player, or are you extremely independent? Are you somebody who works well in an office setting, or are you someone that prefers to work remotely or on your own? The types of things that you know about yourself that make you who you are, right? And you want to be candid and honest about that, because if you're not, at least to some degree, it'll be a bad fit, and nobody wants that. Because remember, an interview is a two-way street. So you want to make sure that the employer or hiring manager or search committee or whomever really feels like you're the right person, but you also want to walk away from that experience knowing that this is the place I want to work. And so it does need to meet in the middle to some degree. And so that's what I mean when I talk about convictions, is knowing kind of the core characteristics of who you are and how you work best. Okay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about applications. A lot of people will wonder a little bit about applications, because it's like, well, why isn't my resume or my cover letter enough? Why do I have to also step through the application? There are a couple of reasons. The first is not everyone who sees your resume and cover letter will be the person that looks at your application. A lot of times companies create these applications because that's their HR/legal conformity portal that all applicants have to be funneled through to be held to the same standard. And that's just that's just sort of a policy level decision they've made. So the application is kind of all of the things that you already have on your resume and that you're aware of. So like the dates, at least month and year of your work history, your address, your phone number, email, all of those things. You may need your salary history at some point, but maybe not. But it's good to at least have that, as well as information for your contacts for your reference people, because you'll want those too. They may ask you to furnish them in the application process. You always want to try to put your best foot forward, but you also have to be honest. It should not surprise anyone that dishonesty in an application can often be grounds for just putting your application to the side, just like that. Some applications will screen. We're going to talk about this when we talk about resumes, but there's software out there called applicant tracking systems or applicant tracking software, ATS. If you've ever used some of the more popular portals like ZipRecruiter or things like that, often there's a software behind there that's doing that work. And a lot of times, they use keywords to pull your application up towards a hiring manager or a search committee. So make sure you're using the words that are in those job descriptions through your application. It's a chance to sell your skills, so use the space wisely. Often there's a word count limit on applications. I have filled those up before. It is very limiting to try to articulate yourself and what you can bring to bear. So knowing the types of skills you have and how they're relevant to the job in question is critical, because you may have a 300 word count, a 600 word count that's limiting. So be aware of that. So use your space wisely. So again, you can concisely, but in a compelling way, articulate your skills. Follow all of the directions. I cannot tell you when I step through an application with a customer how often they will miss a chunk of it. It may not be compulsory, because a lot of times those applications will stop you if you don't answer a compulsory question, but leaving even a non-compulsory area of an application blank can be enough for a hiring manager to consider you not the right fit. So be complete and be neat. Check your spelling, check your capitalization. I know you think, well, of course, who wouldn't? You would be shocked at the number of times I work with customers and we have to go back and just make sure that we clean that part up because we really want to, again, put our best foot forward. A hiring manager or search committee will assume that the way that you apply for a job is the way you do a job. And so if you're not complete and if you're not taking care to make sure everything's correct and proper in terms of both the grammar and the spelling and all of that, they'll assume that's how you work. We don't want that. So make sure you think of that as you step through the application process, even before your resume and cover letter. Okay, quick proofreading exercise. I'd like you to take a look at this sort of jumbled-ish little paragraph here. And I want you to count the number of the letter F as in foxtrot. I want you to see how many there are. I'm going to give you about 5 seconds to count, and then we're going to go forward. Okay, time's up. All right. Now, no, I want to go back. So, so now how many, there are 6 Fs in this, just FYI. How many got 6? You don't have to, there are 6. Sorry, Lisa. There are 6. So it's easy to miss ofs, okay? So there are, so the F in the word of, a lot of people miss that. So this is a quick proofreading exercise to just kind of realize that we can take things for granted when we're doing this. But when a reader is really looking at your materials, their time is valuable, but if they notice mistakes, that can be enough to pull you aside, especially for those competitive positions that we all want. Those we have to be at the top of our game. So think very carefully about when you do those applications. Yes, there are 6. So, okay. When you are looking at your job history, this is one that comes up all the time in these. I want you to think about this, why you left your jobs, okay? So people, just FYI, in America are separated from their jobs every single day. Every single day, all across this great country of ours. It's happening. It's happening now. It's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen the next day. It happened yesterday. So that is not something that disqualifies you. Sometimes people are laid off. The company is acquired by another company and people are made redundant. Sometimes there's a safety issue and everybody the company has to close because there's a safety problem. You may have seasonal employment, and once it turns to winter, that employment is over. Those are all issues that aren't part of your choice. It's something that happened to you because of stuff at 30,000 feet economically or in our structure. So others are your choice. Sometimes you leave because it's not a good fit. A lot of times people are separated, involuntarily, simply for attendance. In fact, it's probably one of the number one reasons why people are separated, is because of attendance. So you want to make sure that you can discuss that. So, if attendance is an issue because there was a dependent care issue in your family, there was a family crisis that was going on, and you just couldn't be there, you want to make sure that you can articulate that quickly and concisely and say that it's resolved. Because that happens to everybody in life. That's not a character flaw. That is simply how our lives sometimes happen, and sometimes that's just a streak of bad luck. But that's what happened, and so you want to be able to articulate all of those areas for reasons for leaving those. Vague statements like personal reasons or things like that, those are too vague. So you want to make sure that when you put that in there, you're articulating, again, it was a chunk of time that happened. It's resolved because of a dependent care issue, and that's over now. So thankfully, I'm able to move forward, something like that. Try to avoid words like fired or quit. Separated is a better term. Simply because it's just an easier term to understand, and it doesn't have some of the cultural baggage that those words have. So you also want to contact some of your former employers, because they just might be contacted in the verification process, depending on the kind of company, so that they know that they're going to get a phone call. It's usually just it's the polite thing to do. So FYI. Okay, so portfolios. Let me talk a little bit about this. All right, a lot of times when we talk about portfolios, we think of those are things that like artists have, right? Like this is my photojournalist or a photographer or a painter or something like that have. When I talk about portfolios, I'm talking about having at your fingertips or somewhere very easy to get to all the things you need to complete an application. Not necessarily in paper, but maybe, but also electronically stored somewhere secure that you can get access to it. So that portfolio has, whether it's saved on a thumb drive or on a desktop or where have you, your resume that's up to date and it's been proofread. And those services are available at Career Force. So if you are concerned about your resume, creative job search on the resume part, and then talk to us at Career Force. We can help you with those resumes and cover letters, and making sure that your cover letters are adaptable and your resumes are adaptable, because you want a curated resume and cover letter for each new position you're applying for. You don't want to use the same one over and over again. You want something that's specific, because you pull your reader into your resume and cover letter in a much more compelling way than when it's a generic one, because they see a lot of generic ones. Okay, so you want one that's specifically tailored to each job. So spend a little bit of time on that. You want a sheet with your references, and I want to really emphasize this. Make sure you have your references up to date. I know that when I've applied for jobs and I've had supervisors who have retired or have moved to different areas, their phone numbers change, their emails change, all their contact information changes. So make sure that you're keeping that up to date, because if you have a reference that has, again, retired since you last knew them, but they're a great reference, you're going to need their personal phone number and a personal email to make sure that the HR people who check on you can get a hold of them. If you have any letters of reference or letters of recommendation, you want those at your fingertips in paper, but also I would recommend scanning them as PDFs so that you have those available, because you may need to furnish those electronically. Work samples, if you are in any type of industry that requires work samples, like creative industries, you want to have a work sample. Maybe that's a clip of music you composed. Maybe that's pictures that you took as a photographer, anything like that. If it's a website you designed, things of that nature that people can look at, because some industries do require work samples, and then copies of any certifications or licensures that you've obtained in your work history. So that could be your passage for your nursing boards, or that can be a certification you got for a career in human resources. Any of those that you have, both again in paper, and you would like to have those scanned electronically so that you have those all in one place. Because when you step through an application, depending on the company and depending on what they're trying to ascertain about you, you may need some or all of these. It's just going to save you a great deal of time if you have these at your disposal. So think of that kind of very carefully. Branding. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about branding. So when I talk about that, I want to talk a little bit about branding. So a couple things. When I look at, and I've done this when I was on the other side of a table where I was in a hiring position, or in a position to evaluate candidates. When I saw materials, application materials, like a CV or a resume, a cover letter, things like that, that were all in different fonts, different sizes, different things, it immediately felt there was a disconnect in terms of their attention to detail, or their kind of what they were about, or maybe they weren't using, something specific for us. So what you want is you want to make sure you want to have the brand that looks the same. So in these two settings, you have a cover letter and you have a resume, and you want to do a couple things. So first off, and this should go without saying, but I have to say it. First is the cover letter and the resume have to match in terms of resonance. Okay, when I say resonance, I mean this. When you talk about experience that you have for 10 years as a computer trainer, it needs to articulate the same length of time, duration, and years in the cover letter. Okay, there shouldn't be disparities between the resume and the cover letter. They should line up. Okay, the articulation of your qualifications, of the skills that you bring to the table, they need to line up on both the resume and the cover letter, because, and I'll tell you why, when you have this in an email, that cover letter is often, if it's asked for a cover letter, that cover letter is often the way that the reader makes the decision to read your applications more closely. Okay, so you want to make sure that that cover letter is articulating yourself in a strong way, but also brings them into your resume, because that's going to bring them into a decision about whether they want to talk to you and bring you in for either a screening interview to bring you to the second round, or invite you straight up to an interview. And so you want to really make sure that when you have your cover letter articulated, it really pulls the reader in with your brand, who you are, and then reiterates that in your resume. So again, this is something that we can talk to you about at CareerForce. I guarantee you, when I talk to people at CareerForce, I make sure that the cover letter and the resume are in the same font, in the same font size, the same margin size. I know that sounds silly, like, yep, but we have to do it. Like, we do all of that. I will tell you personally, I am a huge hand on heart believer in Times New Roman. I know it's sort of the thing that everybody does in boilerplate, but you would, couple things. First, be amazed at how many people try to create an individual look or brand with a cutesy kind of rarely used font. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Secondly, and you'll talk about this as we talk about resumes, is applicant tracking softwares, which are used, a lot. Oftentimes they do better when they scan these with standardized fonts. Times New Roman is one of those fonts that you want to standardize. So, or that you want to use, because it's a standardized font. So it can scan the keywords and it can scan your cover letter and your resume more efficiently, and it can pull you out to match as a little bit easier if you're using one of those standardized types of fonts like Times New Roman. So if you take anything away from this, take this away. Take a look at your materials and look and try to put them in Times New Roman, because that is going to help you with that. So that, again, it just feels like it should go without saying, but it is kind of a key part of the process. So, and with that, I'll show you another version of the cover letter here. Do you see the difference? Yes, you do see the difference. Good, I'm glad. That's the difference. See how the fonts are the same? See how the headers are the same? The margins are the same? That's the kind of difference that you can see when you do branding. So, and I guarantee you, as someone who's sat across that table, it definitely makes an impact when I see the similarities between the two, because it just brings me into their story more completely, and I make the decision to read more closely with more intent, with fewer distractions, and focus in a little bit easier when I see materials that are the same size, font size, and same style. All right, now my favorite time, question time. Like I said, you've absorbed a lot of information in the last 40 minutes, and so I fully expect you to have questions. And so, Sheila, what does our group have for us today?
Okay, let's go back to applications a little bit.
Sure.
So what kind of guidance do you have if they ask about your disability?
Sure. So a lot of times the applications will ask about disabilities, like, do you have any needs for accommodations, or are there any disabilities? So it's a personal decision on if you want to disclose that. They can't force you to do that. A lot of times those questions are optional in an application. My rule of thumb is whatever you're comfortable with, put forward. You aren't under an obligation at the application stage to disclose that part if you don't want to. If they're disabilities that are physically obvious, when you get to the interview, or if there are things that would require an accommodation in your interview, that's when you might want to bring that up. Because it may be what you need to get to the interview. So you may need to make sure that they're, let's say if you were, are using assistive technologies, or if you have mobility concerns, that you might want to bring that up at that point, so that they can make sure that you're able to get to where you need to go, or be able to interview comfortably with them at that point. So usually I would say whatever you feel comfortable with, that's where you go on you. And then if you choose not to, and it becomes an issue for you at the interview, then you want to ask for those reasonable accommodations at that stage, because it'll make things easier for you to interview comfortably.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Someone is asking, is there any way you can avoid age discrimination, maybe either through the application or the resume, but also they have a taped conversation from a place they applied 2 years ago, so it may have taken place during the interview process as well.
Yeah. So, I'll bracket that with, the person who asked this, please do register for Job Search Over 50. And please do for that creative job search module. Because it's going to address that concern head on. Just as an anecdote, I'll tell you, I host an online job club on Friday afternoons through CareerForce. And if there's one topic that comes up more often than any other, it's that employers went with somebody less experienced and younger, rather than me with more experience and older. And they're just left really crestfallen, because they bring so much more to the table. And they're feeling that they were excluded because of their age, not because there were any gaps in their work history, there were any concerns about their core competencies, there are any issues about their ability to bring either soft skills or transferable skills, any of those. And the fact of the matter is, when we're doing that, we're dealing with stereotypes. We're going to talk about that in Job Search Over 50, because my feeling is, and you'll see this, is when we address stereotypes head on, and call it out, that's your best approach to talking about that. Because a lot of times when people are doing that, they're thinking, well, we're not going to be able to afford this person. They've got too much qualifications. They're going to ask for too much money. We can't afford it. Or they might retire soon. I don't want to hire somebody just for them to retire 3 years later, or that type of, yeah. The job search over 50 module is going to give you the tools on how to address those types of back of the mind things that a search committee or a hiring manager might be asking of you or might be thinking about as they're screening you in an interview. So please register for that. But typically when we talk about those types of things, we're talking about addressing the stereotypes that come along with just the passage of time. So I really emphasize, I want to underline that for you. And then if you have more questions, more concerns, let's you will get this emailed to you. Email us or come to your local career force and we can do a one-on-one to try and couch some strategies to kind of attack those concerns.
Okay. And then let's go to portfolios. Someone gave us some suggestions in the chat for this, but do you have any suggestions for a portfolio platform that can be shared on my LinkedIn?
Yeah.
And someone suggested Wix and WordPress. Do you have any other?
Yeah, I would say it would depend a couple things. It depends on your industry. So a lot of times I say put your portfolio should be on LinkedIn in and of itself. So you should have some of your skills on there, and then any samples of work should be posts on your LinkedIn profile that you pin so that people who see your profile and click on the posts will see that right away. It's a little different if you are in a creative industry like music or audiovisual, where they take up a lot of bandwidth. So the file sizes don't always fit on there. So then you're going, there used to be one called eFolio that has gone away, unfortunately. So to have a portfolio platform, usually I say go to create that on LinkedIn, and then I don't necessarily know if I would create a third party like WordPress or Wix. That's kind of at your risk. So it's up to you. Some of those are free, some of those aren't free. So just be aware of that. But usually when I talk about portfolio platforms, LinkedIn is typically the one that I usually recommend as the one, and then pin the posts on your LinkedIn that showcase kind of what you've been doing based on your industries. So if you're a photographer, it'll be pictures. If you're a poet, it'll be poetry, those types of things.
Okay, good. I'm not a guru of LinkedIn, so I learned something today. Thank you.
Yeah. I will tell you that, I'll just tell the room also, guys, when you register for services like your local job clubs or even job clubs online, I'll tell you, LinkedIn is, first off, Job Club is awesome. It's my favorite thing I do here. Questions about LinkedIn come up almost every job club that we do is how do I optimize it? How do I do that? The creative job search module on social media and especially LinkedIn will talk about that part too, because when people do searches on LinkedIn, there are ways to create a LinkedIn profile that pulls people into your LinkedIn profile and keeps them there. And so do register for that if you're interested in LinkedIn, if you're interested in LinkedIn as well as Job Club.
Okay. Is your Job Club online, Jason, or is it in person?
Yes. So if you go to careerforce.mn/events, Sheila, you can probably put that direct URL in the chat, and you click on that, you can search for a job club that is out there. So job clubs that are online or that are close to you physically, any of those are available. You'll be pulled through the CareerForce site, and you'll be able to register for those job clubs. Job clubs that are online, of course, do require pre-registration because that's how we send out the login credentials to you. You want to do that because with that URL, we can make sure that you have all the time and space to answer your questions, and that we know that you're expected to attend our job clubs. So definitely take advantage of that. Job club, I think, is one of the best things that I do here. It's my favorite part of my job.
Do they have to search through the Thief River Falls location to get that?
Goodness, no.
No? Okay.
You can literally, when you get there, you can type in the words job club, and you'll see matches that will come up there. Or if you prefer to search by your zip code, you can do that as well, depending on where you are. You can type in your zip code and just click search, and it'll give you everything that's around you.
Okay, perfect. Then we have a question about cover letters. How do I define a cover letter based on my resume?
Okay, good question. We'll talk about that when we get to that in that creative job search module, but here's my 2 cents. I'll tell you this from experience. When I was on search committees, on the other side of that, the cover letter was the document that made me want to read more closely and get more invested in the applicant, as to whether or not I wanted to continue to read and really drill down into that, or whether I was going to do a surface reading and then just kind of look, right? I hate to say that, but that's probably what most readers in most HR-ish type of settings are. So the cover letter really should be, to my mind, the cover letter is where you bring in that it was a dark and stormy night, right? So, we open a book and you read that first sentence and you're just immediately pulled into the story, like, oh, dark and stormy night, something's happening tonight. Oh, I can't wait to find out. That's the cover letter. The cover letter is where you entice the reader to keep reading what you can bring to the table and invest them in your story. That's the cover letter, because then they're going to be reading your resume with more intent and more carefully and with more seriousness. So I usually say your cover letter is where you create that it was a dark and stormy night kind of statement for them to read, and you bring them into your resume. And that's what a cover letter, in my feeling, should accomplish. It creates that interest the reader will have to keep reading and keep their interest with you.
Okay, and I think we just have one more question so far. What are your thoughts on the length of a resume? Should it only be 1 page or is 3 okay?
Depending on your industry, it can be 2 pages. 3 pages is okay, depending on the industry. Certain fields, like in executive fields or academic fields, that's actually quite standard. I will tell you that after 2 pages, unless it's the industry standard, a lot of people won't get to that. They'll make a decision as to whether they're going to interview you or want to talk to you after they get to that second page. They may get into the third page as well. But typically they'll arrive at a decision about you before they get there. I wouldn't truncate your experience or what your skills are unless it's absolutely necessary, though, for a resume. So the old rule of thumb where it's like it has to be 1 page, no more. I think that's out of date. My suggestion would be, if you're concerned about the effectiveness of your resume or your cover letter, please take advantage of both the creative job search module that deals with that, but also make an appointment with your local career force, like at Job Club, or for an individual appointment with us. And we can go into much more detail one-on-one about where we can strengthen your application materials and make yours really just pop in any type of applicant pool.
Okay, I think we covered all the questions, Jason.
Great. Well, Sheila, again, thank you, Sheila. And I just want to tell our attendees, thank you so much for being here. I know that this process of looking for new employment or thinking of a new career is daunting. One of the great things about creative job search is you realize you are not alone in this. And so we are here. That's why we're here, is to help you. So it can feel, you can go through a lot of emotions during this process. That's natural. But again, we're here for you. So if you feel like you need more, or if you feel like you want more elaboration, reach out, careerforcemn.com/events, and we're always delighted to help you in this process.
Thank you. Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Okay, everyone. Again, you'll get all of this and more, and we hope to see you again. Take care.